Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 26, 2016 meeting of the Kern County Planning Commission. We have a quorum. Madam Clerk, will you please call roll?
Mr. Louie?
Here.
Mr. Babcock?
Here.
Ms. Garcia? Ms. Poole? Mr. Sprague?
Here.
Mr. Hall? Here. Ms. Oviatt? Mr. Denny?
Here.
Thank you. Let's move on to item number B, commission member announcements or reports. Are there any?
None for me.
None for me.
Seeing none, let's move on to approval of the minutes of May 12, 2016. Are there any corrections?
Motion.
There's a motion to approve by
Second.
Commissioner Sprague, second by Commissioner Babcock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. It looks like there's no cases to be withdrawn or requests for continuances. And so let's move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Denny.
Yes, Commissioner Louie. On our consent agenda tonight, we have several cases. These items are scheduled before the Planning Commission, which are being recommended for approval by the staff, and the applicant has been informed of any special conditions and has no objection. The hearing on these items may be expedited if no member of the commission or audience wishes to comment or ask questions on the case. Our first item on the consent agenda is item number 2. This is conditional use permit case number 2, map 115. Our applicant is Stockdale Investment Group by Stantec Consulting, Inc. This is for property located approximately 1.5 miles southeasterly of the intersection of Garlock Road and Goler Road, north of Rendsburg. This request is a modification of a conditional use permit that was approved in 1986 that allowed a surface mining operation and a site reclamation plan in an NR20 district in accordance with the provisions of SMARA. The request is to change reclamation requirements related to revegetation, maximum slopes, and retention of waste rock stockpiles above natural grade by amending conditions 13, 17, 18, 21, and 25. With regard to condition 17, this amendment is actually a deletion. Staff recommendation is to approve modification of the conditional use permit subject to the original conditions of approval with the revision of conditions 13, 17 by deletion, 18, 21, and 25 as proposed, and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolution. Our next item on the consent agenda is a new case. This is item number 3, conditional use permit number 5, map 71-6. Our applicant is Robin and John Mallow by Jose Alfredo Munez and Elizabeth Figueroa. This is for property located at 2264 West Bowman Road in Ridgecrest. This is also a modification of a conditional use permit originally approved in 2011, which allowed the installation of an additional single-family dwelling during a temporary period of medical hardship to amend conditions to allow an extension of time due to a continuing medical hardship in an E1RS MHH district. The staff recommendation on this is to approve the modification of condition 5C, subject to the remaining original conditions of approval, and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolution. Our next item on the consent agenda is number 4. This is conditional use permit case number 35, map 230-21. Our applicant is Rosamond Chamber of Commerce, Inc. In this particular case, we've also handed out a late piece of comment that was received to your commission. This is a conditional use permit to allow a community event center in a C2 general commercial district at 2861 Diamond Street in Rosamond. Staff recommendation: approve in accordance with the recommended conditions and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the attached draft resolution. Our next item is item number 5. This is agricultural preserve number 5, inclusion in map number 76. Our applicant is Sage Creek Ranch LLC by Brian Bone. This is for property located 1 mile southwest of the intersection of Lerdo Highway and I-5 in the Button Willow area. Staff recommendation: advise Planning Commission to recommend the Board of Supervisors to approve inclusion as requested, adopt suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolution. Next item on the consent agenda is item number 6. This is a general plan amendment number 3, map 56, zone change case number 10, map 56, Precise Development Plan Number 1, Map 56. Our applicant is Mike Kern by Porter and Associates, Inc. This is for property located at 16674 Highway 43 in Wasco. This is a request to amend the land use, open space, and conservation element of the Kern County General Plan from Map Code 8.1, Intensive Agriculture, to Map Code 7.2, Service Industrial, or more restrictive Map Code designation, in conjunction with a change in zone classification from A1, Limited Agriculture, to M2 PD, Medium Industrial, Precise Development Combining, or more restrictive district, in conjunction with a precise development plan to authorize the establishment of a truck service and repair business in an M2 PD district. Staff recommendation: advise the Planning Commission to recommend the Board of Supervisors to approve the general plan amendment as requested, approve the zone change as requested, approve the precise development plan subject to recommended conditions, and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolutions. Our last item on the consent agenda for tonight is conditional use permit number 19, map 143-1. This is item 7 on the agenda. The applicant is Nahi Casas by Tuni Sadi. This is for property located at 10428 Main Street in Lamont. This is a conditional use permit to allow the retention of a cargo container accessory to an existing convenience market. Staff recommendation: approve in accordance with the recommended conditions and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the draft resolution. This completes staff's presentation of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Denny. Is there any member of the audience who would like to have an item on the consent agenda removed and heard at a full public hearing in its normal order? Sir, can you please come forward to the microphone? Would you please state your name for the record?
My name is Dennis Chandler.
Mr. Chandler, which item would you like removed?
See, the first one, I believe, is the one by Garlock Road and Ransburg Road.
This is item number 2.
Well, this is case number 4 on my paperwork. It was the staff report from 2 weeks ago. Change case number 4.
Case number 4.
It's amendment to zoning map number 114.
Commissioner Louie, if I may.
Yes.
Mr. Chandler, I believe, may be
Yes.
talking about a request that was considered previously by your Planning Commission and is now being advertised for consideration by the Board of Supervisors later on.
I remember, sir, you came to our last Planning Commission
sir.
meeting 2 weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
That item was actually approved by this commission, and it was forwarded now to the Board of Supervisors for their review and their consideration. And so that has been noticed, I believe, Mr. Denny, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been noticed to the public that the Board of Supervisors will be taking up that matter on, do you know what date?
No, I don't, not at the present time.
You can work with Mr. Denny later tonight, or you can look on the website to find that matter to see when the date the Board of Supervisors will be taking that matter up. And you're more than welcome to come to the Board of Supervisors meeting to address the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming. Okay, any other consent agenda items that any member of the audience would like to have removed for full consideration? Seeing none, any commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to pull number 2 and have it heard in its regular order.
Okay. Any others? Mr. Sprague, Commissioner Sprague?
No, it's all right.
Okay, it looks like item number 2 on the consent agenda will now be heard in its regular order during a public hearing. And so as to the rest of the consent agenda, is there a motion? Any action?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 as read in by staff.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Babcock, second by Commissioner Sprague. Please cast your votes.
All ayes.
And it looks like items 3, 4, and 7 have a notice of appeal. Mr. Denny?
Correct, Commissioner Louie. Notice of right appeal. For projects where Planning Commission action is final, actions are subject to appeal to the Board of Supervisor by any interested person, and no development proposed by any application may be authorized until after the final date of appeal. Those items that are final at tonight's commission that were on the consent agenda were items number 3, number 4, and number 7. An appeal may be filed with the Kern County Planning and Community Development Department at 2700 M Street, Suite 100 in Bakersfield, with a filing fee of $540 on forms available at the Planning and Community Development Department. In these particular cases of 3, 4, and 7, since they did not involve a land division action, the filing must be made within 14 days of and including the date of hearing. That would be the Wednesday after next by 5 p.m. Any such appeal must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $540. If no appeal is received, the action of the Planning Commission is final. For the purposes of clarification, again, there is no right of appeal for projects for which the Planning Commission's action is advisory to action required by the Kern County Board of Supervisors, and those were items 5 and 6. They will be moving forward for the board's consideration at another public hearing for which another notice will be mailed to the affected residents and county agencies, as well as state and local, state and federal agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Denny. Let's move on to public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the commission on any matter not on this agenda and over which the commission has jurisdiction. Would anyone like to make a public presentation? Sir, it looks like you're... Did you want to say a few more words about something? Come forward, please.
Dennis Younger again. As you noted, I was here 2 weeks ago, and I was the only person here, and I guess everything went to a different meeting, you said? To a supervisor's meeting for that first item?
Yes, that item last week, this commission reviewed, deliberated on, and we approved it, and we forwarded it as a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Now the Board of Supervisors will be taking up that matter.
So it got approved anyway?
No, it hasn't been approved by the Board of Supervisors. All we did was make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors.
But it was approved by this board. Right.
Correct.
When I drove down here and opposed it.
It was approved to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors. What the Board of Supervisors does is up to them.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I get a date from Mr. Denny?
Sure. Yes, you can get the date from Mr. Denny, and you can also find information online. Thank you. All right, let's move on to public hearing number 1.
Our next item on the agenda would be item number 1. This is a enforcement action initiated by the Kern County Planning and Community Development Department, which your commission should be familiar with. With me tonight is Cameron Welch. He is the supervising planner of the operations unit of the Kern County Planning and Community Development Department. This particular enforcement action is on a mining operation. It was first considered by your commission in February of 2015. Subsequent to then, it has been considered and continued 7 times. These continuances were based on what staff believed were slow but nonetheless steady efforts made by the mine operator to resolve issues regarding noncompliance. And essentially, the noncompliance issues that we're looking at for this particular mine are the financial assurance cost estimate, the financial assurance mechanism, and the need for an updated flood study to address the Cuddy Creek break in that mining operation, and the submittal of a revision to the flood insurance rate map. In essence, we're trying to determine the extent of reclamation that's now needed on the site since Cuddy Creek has altered its course and affected that mining operation. What was originally proposed cannot be reclaimed under the plan that was adopted by your commission, or I should say your predecessor, the Board of Zoning Adjustment. The financial assurance cost estimate is a yearly estimate that's reviewed to determine that the money on file is adequate should the applicant or the mine operator not be able to do it. It's essentially a third-party cost that's posted to the county and the state, specifically the Office of Mine Reclamation. The financial assurance mechanism is the tool utilized to carry the funds of the cost estimate. It could be a surety bond, it could be a letter of credit, it could be a certificate of deposit, depending upon the amount needed. In this particular case, again, what we're dealing with is a technical issue with regard to a break in the Cuddy Creek, which is gone in and severely affected the mining pit that was in this area. And again, the reason why mining was occurring in this area is that the drainage channel itself was causing the deposition of sand and gravel. Essentially, some say gravel grows where water flows, and this is where it was removed. Subsequent to a hearing that was considered in December of 2015, the applicant's engineer met with FEMA to discuss the letter of map revision. At that meeting, the intent was to pursue a conversation with them, with the county's support, to make some basic assumptions about what was needed in the letter of map revision, or LOMR. At that meeting, FEMA rejected the ability to make some basic assumptions. They wanted technical data provided, regardless of the level of what could be presumed to be obvious. As a result, what's now happened is the mine operator is using their engineer to have contacted an aerial service, to have flown the site, to have another engineering company do the survey work, transfer that information to a series of materials that then be studied and create what they call a HECRES study to determine the flows and volumes of Cuddy Creek so that we can demonstrate to FEMA where Cuddy Creek is flowing during particular event periods. Once that is done, the county will be able to determine what areas are still subject to reclamation, because obviously we're not going to be able to do reclamation or revegetation within a floodplain. The area that's subject to reclamation has a direct effect on how much money needs to be posted in our financial assurance mechanism. So what we have is a series of dominoing effects for which the study is the principal thing that needs to be resolved. Again, so since December, we've had work performed in March, April, and through May. It's my understanding now the HECRES study was to have been submitted here this week, and I did not get written confirmation, but it was my understanding that we were supposed to have it this week in our Public Works Department. We have asked the mine operator to post the $55,000 identified on page 3. That was the last cost estimate reviewed. That cost estimate basically includes lands that are affected by Cuddy Creek, and of which the HECRES study would actually eliminate those lands. The mine operator has indicated a preference not to post the $55,000. We presently have on file a little over $17,000. The reason they do not want to post that amount of money is that as soon as the HECRES study is done and submitted with the LOMR to the FEMA, they're a firm belief, and it would appear reasonably so, that the cost estimate would drop significantly. So essentially, they're not wanting to lock up funding on this particular aspect at this point in time. Staff, while understanding that, is situated in a position where we need to make sure that we have sufficient funding on file. If we don't, then we have a situation where the county constituency could bear the cost for reclamation. However, the mine operator has not demonstrated their unwillingness to work with the county. It has been slow but deliberate work to help the county resolve this issue. As a result, the county staff believes that we are continuing to make progress, a bit slowly, and as a result is going to recommend that your commission continue this proceedings again till July 28th of 2016. That would be 2 more months. During that time frame, as identified on page 4 of the staff report, we expect at that point in time the county to have reviewed the study, deem it adequate. We want that information submitted to FEMA. We want an updated financial assurance cost estimate based on that flood study to have been submitted to the county and to the state. And of course, what will happen is, once the county deems it acceptable, we will submit it to the state for their review. And at that point in time, we believe that we should also be able to get the financial assurance mechanism, regardless of whether or not the LOMR is approved by FEMA, because we are operating in a means by which both the mine operator and the county agree as to what needs to be done. If we do not get this information and this done by this point in time, as we've indicated to your commission in the past, there are options that could be initiated as identified on page 4 of the staff report. They could include allowing additional time to cure the violation, imposing new or additional conditions, increasing the amount of the original security, but again, at this point in time, as we've discussed, the applicant is not wanting to post additional funds based on work they believe will negate the need for that funds, or your commission could impose an administrative penalty, which, if done so, could be appealed to the board. Staff, while recognizing the sensitivity of the nature of this type of situation, believes it would be more prudent to put the monies into the financial assurance rather than into a penalty fee. And as such, we have not recommended penalties on this project to date. So in conclusion, staff's recommendation at this time, after advising your commission of the work that's been performed since its last consideration of this request, is to once again continue consideration to July 28th of 2016. This completes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Denny. I'll open the public portion of this hearing on item number 1. Does anyone in the audience like to speak in opposition to staff's recommendation to continue this matter to July 28, 2016 to give the mine operator more time to take corrective action? Seeing none, would anyone like to speak in favor of staff's recommendation? Seeing none, I'll close the public portion of this meeting and return it to the dais. Commissioners, any comments? Any action?
If there's no comments, then I move we continue this to July 28th.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Babcock, second by Commissioner Sprague. Please cast your votes.
All ayes.
All right, let's move on to public hearing number 2. Mr. Denny.
Item number 2 involves another mining operation seeking a modification. This is conditional use permit case number 2, map 115. This particular mine site is located southeasterly at the intersection of Garlock Road and Goler Road, north of Randsburg. This case was originally scheduled to be considered by your commission on its May 12th, 2016 agenda, but it was continued for 2 weeks to tonight's hearing to ensure sufficient time was provided to the Office of Mine Reclamation, the state agency, to review the proposal. They did complete that review, and they did furnish staff with comments. Again, as a reminder, plans that are subject to a review and approval get 30 days review time by the state, and for financial assurances, they're entitled to 45 days under the law. Our mine site, if we can get that on the overhead, is a 16.5-acre portion of a 300-acre parcel. This mining operation was originally approved in 1986, 30 years ago. It was a mining operation intended for the extraction of gold, along with a reclamation plan. Subsequent to its approval, the original operator, Consolidated Placer Dredging, sold the operation to our current operator, Stockdale Investment Group, and they have been operating the mine, or they have been the operator of responsibility for that mine since that point in time. On page 2 of the staff report, it basically explains that under the Surface Mine and Reclamation Act, the county is required to perform a yearly inspection at a minimum of every mining operation in Kern County. Each mine operator is required to file a report by January 1st of every calendar year for the previous calendar year. In July 1st of 2016, we'll be receiving reports for mine operators for the 2015 calendar year. After July, county staff will inspect the 80 or so mines in Kern County, prepare a report, and submit it to the state and to the mine operators. In the year 2000 annual inspection report, which was for the 1999 calendar year, it was concluded that there was no evidence of mining activity at that site. So in essence, mining operations had ceased at that site. When mining operations cease for more than a year, or I should say a year, they lose their entitlement to mine unless they get approval of an interim management plan, and those interim management plans are supposed to be approved within 90 days of cessation. There was no IMP approved, so therefore this mining operation no longer has an entitlement to mine. It was from that point in time forward subject to reclamation. The reclamation conditions that were in effect on the older mining permits that we saw in Kern County required that reclamation be initiated and completed within a period of 12 months. We have since learned that that's not possible. It is not possible in a desert environment to initiate reclamation and have it deemed complete within 12 months. In many instances, our reclamation activities that I've observed since 1990 have taken anywhere from 3 to 7 years to be completed, and these are with active revegetation efforts. By that, I mean we have construction equipment on site scarifying the land, we have reseeding occurring. We do not advocate using any water other than natural events, because if you do apply water to reclaimed land or land undergoing reclamation, then you're penalized by having to need another 2 years of monitoring. So in Kern County, most mine operators after cessation will turn around and reapply seed in November, taking advantage of the winter rains so that they can begin monitoring the following year for the growth. This mine, again, is no longer subject to mining. It is strictly under reclamation plan. Along those lines, financial assurances, as we've indicated, are required to be posted for a mine, and they are reviewed annually, every year, as part of the mine inspection. In numerous instances, we get mine operators who would like to have their financial assurance released within that 12-month period. In 1993, the state mining law was significantly changed to require that there be very specific measurements taken as to what constituted accurate or complete reclamation. As you noted, this plan was approved in 1986, 7 years before those requirements came into place. Subsequent to the work that was performed by the mine operator on the site, they had asked the county in several instances to deem the site reclaimed, and the county refused to do so because they believed, in essence, that reclamation had not been completed. We saw areas of erosion. We saw areas where revegetation was not occurring. We discussed this with the mine operator, encouraged them to do additional work, but we were also cognizant in those areas where you try to do additional work by bringing equipment in, doing additional work can also cause additional damage to work or revegetation that's already occurred. Ultimately, in 2005, staff and the mine operator could not reach a consensus that reclamation had been completed. In order to release the financial assurance, technically, the mine operator has to turn in an inspection report that basically says that reclamation's been complete. They have to turn in a zero cost estimate, meaning that there's no longer a need for financial assurance. With that, the State Office of Mine Reclamation will come down to a site. They will verify that the inspection report is correct, that there is no need for further reclamation. They will allow the county, in this case, to release the financial assurance. The monies will be refunded, and the mine will be closed as far as reclamation. In 2005, even though the county indicated that they did not believe the work had been sufficiently completed, we asked the state for assistance in offering an opinion. They came down, they reviewed the site, they agreed with the county and said, no, work has not been sufficiently completed. The state has come down again more recently in 2015. When the state came down at that point in time, essentially 10 years later, they have indicated that yes, through natural revegetation, wind-blown revegetation, successful revegetation in their mine has occurred. They believe the site is reclaimed. To that end, they have provided staff with information that we've incorporated into the staff report, and at this point in time, the mine operator is once again wanting to get the mine deemed reclaimed. However, to that end, there are several conditions of approval which are identified on page 3 that are inconsistent with the situation that occurs out on the project site. Condition 13 states that whenever the exterior limit of excavation is reached, the pitch slope shall be finished to a final slope not to exceed 5:1. This is very flat. The grading code requires 2:1, horizontal to vertical on graded land as being a stable slope. There are no slopes on this mine site, whether they be pit slopes or overburden or other types of slopes that exceed 2:1. So in essence, all the slopes conform with the grading code, and they have been revegetated. So the applicant is asking for revisions in condition 13 to reflect that 2:1 slopes are adequate and that the vegetation that's been observed by the state is sufficient. In my experience in working with the mines in Kern County, if I may, for your commission, I have not seen a 5-to-1 slope on any other mine site, and I have worked on 40 mines in their permitting since 1990. Most slopes are 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. I have never seen a 5-to-1 before. This is a very old plan. Condition 17, which the mine operator is asking to be stricken, basically states that upon completion of the mining operation, all waste materials from the pits shall be returned to the existing pits, and no waste materials are to be left standing above natural grade. This was a very common condition in the 1980s. It fell out of favor in many instances in the 90s and 2000s with county staff, because in many instances, all SMARA says, the Surface Mining Reclamation Act, is that you have a stable landform that's consistent with surrounding topography. And in this case, because our slopes are all 2-to-1 and they are revegetated, they are stable. There are waste materials. Okay, this is overburden type sand material that did not contain precious metals for the mining operation. I would also note that there would have been another mining operation that asked for an amendment of conditions. That was the Holloway mine site. They had material standing above grade that was supposed to be returned to the pits. They found an alternative market for that, and they asked your commission to have it amended so that they could sell it rather than put it back into the pits. In essence, again, as a reminder, all SMARA requires is that we have a stable form that conforms with surrounding topography. And with these waste materials that you see on this particular mine site, they're very large piles, and by large piles, I mean they cover large areas. They are essentially knolls. I wouldn't call them hills, but they are knolls of various sizes out there, and they create an undulating terrain. Staff agrees with the applicant that there's no need to move these materials back into the pits, because if we do, we will then destroy the revegetation that's occurred on these areas. We'll put it back into the pit, and then the pits will have to become revegetated again, and we could be looking at another 3+ years for that to happen. Number 18 states that upon completion of all mining activity, all structures, equipment, excluding utilities, are to be removed or converted to other permitted uses compatible with the existing zone. This is still a common condition in our mining permits today, because we have a lot of utilities that once strung are utilized for other features. It also states that no abandoned structures, and the inclusion on this one is, or abandoned equipment or unused stockpiles of material are to be left on site. And the applicant is asking that the phrase, or unused stockpiles of materials, this is being put in. These stockpiles that they're asking to be deleted are the waste materials, the waste sands that are standing above grade that they asked for in the deletion of condition 17. Condition 21, which they're looking to have amended, is very similar. The very end of this, they're asking that the phrase "and unused stockpiles" be stricken to be consistent with the revisions to conditions 17 and 18. The last item that we have here is condition number 25, and what's being sought here is clarification, because in this particular case, staff has inserted that the all disturbed areas be replanted, which is a phrase that's being added, in addition to the reseeding, whether it be natural or man-made reseeding, using plantings or a seed mixture and rate of application. And what we're looking at here is deleting the phrase "recommended or approved by the U.S. Soil Conservation Service," and instead replacing it with what's specified in the approved reclamation plan. Now, the Office of Mine Reclamation has provided a seed mixture, which the applicant, I believe, has utilized, in addition to that which has been blown in from the surrounding area. The U.S. Soil Conservation Service was a common phrase as a condition of approval that was used in years past. And again, these comments that are being provided by staff are also reiterated on page 4. But the U.S. Soil Conservation Service doesn't even exist anymore. It's now referred to as the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the county has not looked to them for providing information on seed mixtures in well over 20 years. We believe that the comments that have been developed by the applicant and the OMR are sufficient. So with those changes, the applicant is believing that once we amend these conditions and the reclamation that's been done to date, the reclamation will be done in conformance with the approved plan. And with that, they should be able to turn in a zero-cost estimate and inspection report from the county to the state, so that the state can then come down and agree and allow the county to release the financial assurance, because both they and the county no longer believe that additional work is necessary on this mine site. And with that, This concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions that may be asked.
Thank you, Mr. Denny. At this point, I'll open the public portion of this hearing on item number 2. Is the applicant here? Yes. Would the applicant like to make a statement? Mr. Goldner? Good evening.
Thank you. Barry Goldner, appearing on behalf of the applicant. We don't have any particular statement to offer at this time. Because there's a public hearing, we'd like to be apprised of any concerns so that we might be able to address any concerns related to the proposal.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to staff's recommendation? Seeing none, is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of, in addition to Mr. Goldner's comments, in favor of staff's recommendation? Seeing none, I'll close the public portion and return it to the dais. Are there any commissioner comments or questions? Mr. Sprague, you're in the queue. Commissioner Sprague.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spoke with Mr. Denny about the waste material and why it's not being put back in the mining pit areas. And Mr. Denny, would you go over that again just to make it public as to what you told me regarding putting that back because of the sloping, et cetera, that was there and that it was basic sand?
The conditions that you see in this permit are very old conditions. Historically, the county's process had been that any material mined would need to be placed back into the pits. It was like that for a very long time. We saw the change occurring in the 90s and through the 2000s where that was changed, because again, the law doesn't require that except for hard rock mine quarries. Under the Surface Mining and Reclamation Act, all that's required is that you leave a stable landform, which is one that doesn't exceed generally 2-to-1 slopes. And we say 2-to-1 slopes because that's what the grading code allows. The grading code is separate from the mining ordinance or the mining law. At the same time, so long as they have a stable slope and they conform to surrounding topography and in a desert environment, we're looking at an undulating land feature. So in that respect, staff does not believe that there's really a need under today's present requirements to put the material back into the pit. Additionally, if we were to move that material now, any revegetation that occurred, whether it was initiated by the applicant as part of their reseeding program or reseeding that occurred as a result of windblown seed coming in, would be destroyed. We'd have to remove a portion of the 16.5 acres to redeposit it into the pit, probably ending up with a more level area for which we then have to wait for revegetation to occur. And the question would be, what do we gain from that? Now, at this point in time, the state has also looked at this, and they are not seeing any erosion as what we saw in 2005, and they are seeing more revegetation. So again, the ultimate thing before your commission tonight is determine if we have them put it back in the pit, what purpose will that ultimately serve?
Okay, one other question. This remains as NR zoned, and so any changes in the zoning would come before the commission and the Board of Supervisors again, correct?
Correct. There is no changing in zoning. There is no zone district in Kern County that allows mining by right. Every zone district that allows mining has to be done by securing approval of a conditional use permit. So this project, should it be deemed ultimately have its conditions amended and later on down the road deemed reclaimed by the county and state, the zoning would remain the same.
So under the NR zone, if someone, the owner of the property, or if it were sold to someone, wanted to develop the property under the requirements under the NR zone, build metal buildings, some industrial stuff out there, how would they deal with what's left in waste materials there? Just would it be subject to a site plan that would be reviewed by the planning department?
Any development in the NR district that does not include a PD would be subject to site plan review, Any structures that would be built would have to have compaction reports, as required under the building code, to be reviewed by the county if structures were to be built on areas that were not native ground or were not native ground as far as their compaction.
Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Denny.
Commissioner Babcock, you have the floor.
Thank you. Could you please put up that map? It's the last page in that map section. Shows the cross sections.
I believe that's the map you're looking for, Commissioner Babcock?
Yes, thank you. I know you did your best. I think Scott said this goes back to 1980, but this is a poor document. I can't read half of it. I don't know what some of these definitions are saying. I took an engineer scale based on what I could read off of this and tried to scale this out. In fact, the C1 doesn't even take, if you notice, that's the bottom one, it doesn't even take your elevations to the top of the stockpile. So there's really difficult to determine the height of the overburden. So, Mr. Denny, you were out there, or maybe the applicant, what's the average height of this above grade? Because I was scaling it, trying to scale it on a 10 engineer scale, on a 10 scale, and a 20 scale, depending off it, vertical or horizontal, according to what's the page denotes here. But it didn't match the elevations, so I don't believe this page is to scale at all.
Commissioner Babcock, if I might, first, I would not use the original map that was put up. I agree with you at the means in which it was drawn. I have several questions. First, it could be a C-size sheet, 24 by 36, that was reduced to 8.5 by 11. Also, I'm not clear that this mining operation actually fully implemented its entire excavation. Again, this was a gold mining operation out there that I believe, if my recollection serves right, involved floating a dredge. It was highly unusual at that time. Most gold mining in Kern County is hard rock mining, but this was floating a dredge over an area. So again, I don't believe it achieved its ultimate disturbance area. There is another set of cross sections that Mr. Welch has put up on the overhead that is something that's drawn to a more technical scale that we see today that does show the an A1 and a B2, so I'll just call it a lengthwise and crosswise cross section of the overall area to generally show you that we have a slope that slopes upward from A1 to B1 with our depression in that middle section. Again, my recollection from visiting the site in 2005 was an undulating terrain to a degree of knolls, as I would refer to them. There's nothing that was significantly tall out there. I'm not known to be a hiker, but I did not get winded walking on this site.
Okay, so well, where I was going with this, if the terrain's relatively flat, and you've got motorcycle riders out there, and they come and they go up over this, and then they hit a 2-to-1, because I was trying to scale this thing, and I was getting, 15 feet. So like I said, I haven't been out there to look at it. So if you're telling me it's nothing near that, then if it's just a few feet above natural grade, then that's a different story. What bothers me with this is the mine operator deliberately did not push this in for years. And then through Mother Nature, it revegetated. And now, we don't want to push it in. So in a sense, he's getting away with something. He didn't follow the conditions that were placed on him at the time. What kind of money is the county holding?
I would have to look further into the case file for that. Commissioner Babcock, if you'd like me to give me a moment, I could try and locate that, or we could
Good.
ask the mine operators representative if they're cognizant of it.
Well, I'm concerned about safety around this, and where I'm going with this is maybe that money would be well spent with the fence around this property.
Commissioner Babcock, through the chair, if I may. The ultimate goal in reclamation, and I don't disagree with you, this isn't an area subject to off-roading. There have been incidents that I'm aware of out in this particular area because there are BLM trails in this area who do cross Goler Road. The issue that we have is ultimately when reclamation is deemed complete on a mine site, it's a stable landform and there's nothing else that needs to be done to it for maintenance. There is a fence, in my recollection, that we had to access in order to get into the mine site. Whether or not that stays up or not, I'm not clear. But the long-term issue that you have with fences is that once reclamation is deemed complete, if you use them to try and prevent people from accessing a mine site, who's going to take care of the fence? It's not bonded for. The reclamation is deemed complete. It was deemed complete by both, it would have been deemed complete, regardless of location, by either a city or county and the state. The slopes are 2 to 1. Those slopes are stable slopes. Could they be abused by a rider? Yes. Are they stable and subject to slough or erosion? Not if revegetated properly. The issue that we've had is that we've looked at using boulders. Boulders can make themselves attractive artifacts for motorcycles to also want to go over. Fences, while they're a little bit more, have the ability to prevent people from trying to cross them, can go into disrepair. And once this is deemed reclaimed, we don't have anyone going out there to verify that a fence is still up. And if you look at this in perpetuity, how long are we supposed to monitor the fences? 10, 20,
Well,
50 years?
Well, I know a good T-post fence with 4 strands of barbed wire put in properly is going to last a long time. And if there's no access needed to it, you don't need a gate.
Commissioner
I have some comments.
Commissioner Babcock,
Commissioner Sprague?
item number 9 says there's a surety bond in an amount of $25,000.
25,000?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I had a couple of comments. You know, both the state and the county went out and inspected this site, and it's both of their expert opinions that the site's been sufficiently reclaimed through revegetation and other natural causes. Furthermore, the site, at least from Mr. Denny telling us, and the state going out there and inspecting it, is in a stable form that conforms with the surrounding topography. So the point, I think, is well taken that any further reclamation activities would probably make things worse than they already are.
I'm not suggesting they do any further reclamation, except putting a fence around the boundaries is not going to disturb. I'm not talking about knocking down. The revegetation has started. All I'm saying is at the time the mine operators ceased, if they had pushed the spoils in, you know, I mined for 30 years out in this county and other counties, if they'd pushed their spoils in at the time as their conditions dictated, but they didn't. They waited and waited and waited, and now there's vegetation on them, and no, we can't touch them now. And I agree.
The last point that I was going to make was that it seems to me that when this original reclamation plan with these conditions was first enacted, it was years ago, and the standards today have changed. And so why would we now be looking at doing something different for this applicant than we do for applicants today. And I understand your point that they didn't do it.
There's
so they
nothing wrong with fencing for safety.
Sure. Commissioner
I'm not
Sprague.
asking them to go in and do any more reclamation except fence for safety.
Mr. Denny,
Or consider it.
Mr. Denny, do we require fences around other mining operations today when they are doing reclamation?
Yes, until they're deemed reclaimed, because once they're deemed reclaimed, they should be a stable, safe place.
And once
Now,
they're deemed reclaimed, that's it, no fence, correct?
not entirely true. We have several hard rock quarries that have very steep 1/2 to 1 slopes. And in those instances, they do have barbed wire fences with double berms or triple berms, but those are literally vertical slopes that an off-road vehicle could possibly go into. And so in those instances, they have fencing and they have signage that advises them they're in a mine area.
But in mine sites similar to this one, would we require fencing once it's been reclaimed?
Once it's deemed reclaimed, no.
Thank you. Commissioner Sprague.
I look at this and appreciate Mr. Babcock's comment, but to me, a fence is probably going to be more detrimental, one, to the free roaming of wildlife out there. The other is that it becomes an obstacle for off-roaders and things like that to get through. And then it has to be maintained somehow because people go out there and go through the tailings trying to mine gold out of what's left there in the waste piles, and they cut the fences, and all at once you just got a big mess out there and a gnarly fence with barbed wire on it.
Yeah.
So to me,
Yeah.
I think it's better off just left fairly level
Let's
and
let it
alone.
go. You convinced me.
So,
Somebody make a motion.
okay. So, Mr. Chairman. back
Is
to you.
there any other comments by any of the commissioners? No, seeing none. Is there a motion?
I would make a motion. Did you read this into the record, Mr. Denny?
I certainly can. Again, there was also an addendum handed out with some comments that were received for your commission's reference. One of these included 2 emails from Peter Adams, who is part of the property ownership, or he's a representative of the property owner, and in it we acknowledge that we're going to continue to coordinate with Mr. Adams regarding any activities on the site. But staff's recommendation on this is to approve modification of the conditional use permit subject to the original conditions of approval with revision of conditions 13, 17, 18, 21, and 25. And of course 17 is revised by being deleted, as proposed, and adopt the suggested findings as set forth in the attached draft resolution.
Yeah,
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, that would be my motion as read into the record by staff.
There's a motion by Commissioner Sprague. Is there a second? I'll second it. Any discussion? All those in favor, please, please cast your vote.
All ayes.
All right. And we come to adjournment. Our next Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for June 9th,
Commissioner.
2000. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a notice of appeal. Excuse me.
If I might, yes. In this particular case, the decision of the Planning Commission is final in this case, and as such, actions are subject to appeal to the Board of Supervisors by any interested person, and no development proposed by any application may be authorized until the final date of appeal. An appeal may be filed with the Kern County Planning and Community Development Department at 2700 M Street, Suite 100 in Bakersfield, with a filing fee of $540 on forms available at the Planning and Community Development Department. The filing must be made within 14 days of and including the date of the hearing. Again, any such appeal must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $540. If no appeal is received, the action of your commission is final.
Thank you. And now we come to adjournment. The next Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for June 9th, 2016 at 7 o'clock in these board chambers. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.